Do you ever feel very overwhelmed or struggling with curriculum decisions? Maybe you go from one curriculum to the next and make a lot of mid year changes to the curriculum decisions you made at the beginning of the year, or maybe you just can't seem to get through some of the curriculums because no one's enjoying it. If any of that sounds familiar, I'd love to invite you to this episode of the Charlotte Mason Mastery Show, which is the part two of a three-part series I'm calling the Confident Homeschool Mom. I'm Dollie Freeman. I'm the host of the Charlotte Mason Way Show. And I would love to invite you over to the Charlotte Mason Mastery website where I can help in equipping you to doing what you do day in and day out. For today's show, I want to encourage you to grab paper and pen, but I want you to grab a paper that's all ready for you. And this is the Confident Kit. This is to help you, even if you've homeschooled for years, this will grow your confidence through the decisions that you're making because I'm walking you step by step how to make decisions for your unique family based on where you think you want your family to go. So if you missed last week's episode, you want to go back because that was part one. And I walked you through the first 10 pages of the Ultimate Homeschool Confidence Kit, where we walk through the very first question that I'm going to help you answer. And that is making sure all my papers are messed up. Decision number one: what method of education fits your philosophy of learning? And so that decision was what we worked on last week. This week, we're going to dive into answering the question, what curriculum will you be using to teach your children? And this is where so many homeschooling moms lack confidence because they've made decisions that in the end feel like the wrong decisions. Maybe they followed some homeschooling advice from their friends, and although it was well-meaning advice, those curriculum choices that a friend made worked for their family but doesn't necessarily guarantee it'll work for your family. And if you've ever been there, you know exactly what I'm talking about. In fact, in 1999, our very first school homeschooling year, when I was teaching kindergarten with my daughter, I made all the wrong choices based off the well-meaning advice of friends. But what I found too is when I went to homeschooling curriculums and was looking at all the curriculum fairs and all the different stuff and talking to exhibitors, they were coming at it from their perspective. Of course, they're going to think it's the best one out there, right? They put their heart and soul into it. Of course, they're going to believe it's going to fit your need. What we need to do is begin to look internally to our root purpose in homeschooling. And I hope if you went through our part one with me last week, that you already know what your root purpose is, that you've defined it and you work through it in the first 10 pages of this kit. If you haven't done it yet, please grab it. The link's at the bottom here, homeschoolconfidencekit.com. Go ahead and download it, print it out. It's 28 pages, and I'm going to walk you through it and help you to make these decisions. Because if you, as a mom, feel confident in your homeschooling choices, the rest of the year is going to feel completely different because you've trusted yourself. Now, this incomplete series is based on Charlotte Mason's quote that says, "Parents should trust themselves more." Isn't that a simple thing to think about? But yet, how do we do that? And it is through the decisions. And Charlotte Mason's talking about confidence being one of several elements to masterly inactivity. But if we cannot understand what confidence is, what it looks like, how to grow our confidence, we're never going to get to that place of trusting. So do me a favor, let me know how well you trust yourself. If you're making a lot of mid-year decisions, honey, you don't trust yourself. That's just boils down to it. If you are asking a lot of advice from friends of what to do and you follow their advice just because they say so, then you're not having confidence about yourself. You are your child's best teacher, and more importantly, you know what's best for your children. Now, there requires some work and research to get to that level, to know each of your individual children. And our friends' advice can guide us to the right thing, as well as exhibitors' choice or can help us make our choices. But if we don't know what we're talking about today, you might find that you've made the wrong decisions. So let's get started. Today we're going to be working through pages. Let me get to it. 11 through 19. So we're going to work through part 2 of the Confidence Kit. You can get it at homeschoolconfidencekit.com. The address is at the bottom. The URL is at the bottom of the video, so you can grab that there. Okay, so we're going to be talking about decision 2. What curriculum will you be using to teach your children? And although the same information will grow each and every one of your confidence, those decisions might be a little different for each and every one of you. And this is what the truth I want you to grab today. All right, so I want to start with this quote from Charlotte Mason. Charlotte Mason says, well, let me back up for a second. Today, I'm going to be walking you through 3 queries, 3 questions that Charlotte Mason said each of us as mothers should be answering. When we can answer these questions, we're going to be better fit to make those decisions about curriculum. And the best thing is, it's going to help you grow your confidence and you're going to trust yourself. This is what Charlotte Mason says. If she take the trouble, she meaning mother, to find a definite and thoughtful answer to each of these 3 queries, she will be in a position to direct her children's studies and will at the same time be surprised to find that 3/4 of the time and labor originally spent by the child at his lessons is lost time and wasted energy. I don't know about you, but I have felt some of our homeschooling years, especially at the beginning, had a lot of lost time and wasted energy. So if you are very interested in making that precious time worth something and saving the energy that you put in and making it worth the energy, Charlotte Mason calls it fruitful purpose. If you're ready for your homeschool to have that fruitful purpose of what your root purpose is going to bring about, then you want to start with these 3 queries. So let's talk about that. As we're making these decisions, I want you to take what I taught last week about the external and internal mechanics of education and understand that we must first earn eager attention. So it's really important that we start there. So eager attention is something that each and every child is more than capable of giving. We know this for a fact because if you have ever put your child in front of anything that has earned their attention, they have given it eager attention. And we know that because if you've ever used Disney in your home, Disney movies have captured attention for children. Since I was a little girl, I used to sit on my daddy's lap and watch Disney every Sunday night. And I know it earned my eager attention. I saw my younger sister earn her eager attention. I saw every one of our children. So you know that the youngest of children can, in fact, have earnest attention, and that's eager attention. And that's what we want. We want to earn that eager attention. When our curriculum choices align with their interests, their attention, we're going to go really far, really fast. And that's the goal. But to do that, there's something that Charlotte Mason talks about that is happening, and that what she's talking about is the object of education. And that's what this show is about. This episode today is about the object of education. Charlotte Mason says, education is the science of relations, appears to me to solve the curriculum, the question of curricula, as showing that the object of education is to put a child in living touch as much as may be the life of nature and of thought. So if you come into this solving the question of curricula, like Charlotte Mason's talking, if you're sitting there and thinking about what it is you're going to provide for your children in curriculum form, then it must have this object of education, which is living touch. Now that living touch changes, right? And this is why Charlotte Mason was so adamant about our children before formal education, using all of their senses, being out in nature as much as possible so that they can, in fact, be in living touch. But what happens, and Charlotte Mason mentions here, is and of thought. Our thoughts are living, they give us spiritual germs, so to speak, as Charlotte Mason talks about. And when we are careful to ensure that what our children are getting in the form of curriculum is in fact creating thought, what ends up happening is the information is not only retained, but it's accepted. And they move forward through life towards that root purpose that the whole reason why you're homeschooling, and being able to get to that end result. Now, Charlotte Mason continues to say, add to this one or two keys to self knowledge, and the educated youth goes from some ideas of self management with some pursuits and many vital interests. So I'm going to elaborate a little bit on this quote. So, one or two keys to self knowledge. Those two keys that Charlotte Mason's talking about is the way of the will and the way of the reason. So the way of the will is what the conscience does, right? The conscience carries out the verdict of the will, and the way of reason helps us to understand our beliefs, those solid things. So if we are focusing on these two things while giving our children curricula to be thinking about and using their senses in, those living touches, next thing you're going to recognize is that your children are starting to grow to fruitful purpose that's on the way to the root purpose of you homeschooling. And they will have some pursuits, meaning that they will follow those interests even without you getting involved. And that's that masterly inactivity happening. It's a beautiful thing when you see it happening within your home. So now let's talk about science of relationship a little bit more. It is the object of education, and with it, it's a natural relationship with a vast number of things and thoughts. So we want our children to be making sure that we're giving them curriculum. Now, mamas, if you have tuned out from me right now, I want you to come back because I want you to recognize that even though Charlotte Mason says living book, she also talked about oral literature. Literature means it's passed from mind to mind. So anything that has mind to mind is in fact living if it is accepted and retained. We need to teach our children, especially in the culture we live in, that some ideas must be rejected and forgotten. But we cannot let that be the knowledge that we're giving to our children. So we have to be very intentional about this. She goes on to say, we must train him upon physical exercise, nature, handicrafts, science and art, and upon many living books. For we know that our business is not to teach him all about anything, but to help him make valid as many as may be of those firstborn affinities that fit our new existence to existing things. So this is what Charlotte Mason talks about ideas. Ideas produce after their kind. So if we introduce our children to, let's say, daffodils, and we show them at a young age that you can blow the seeds out into the air, the next thing you know, that firstborn affinities is that when they see that, the next thing you know, they're going to start looking at other flowers as well, things that look like it, and it will produce ideas after its kind. And they might go up to a buttercup and realize that we cannot blow off a buttercup. And we might be able to start seeing that, because of that, we can see what we call the helicopters that fall from the trees and spin around. I remember all the time as a young child trying to catch the helicopters as they were coming down. These are the science of relationships, and we should be doing a vast number of things and thoughts. So things are tangible, right? And that's curriculum, that's nature. But thoughts are things that they take from nature, that they take from curriculum. And we need to ensure that those thought processes are, in fact, things that they are wholesome. All right, so the purpose of the science of relationship is to put a child in a living touch with ideas of life, of nature, and thought. And it's within this science of relation that an idea is either accepted or retained, or rejected and forgotten. So if you find that you're buying curriculum time and time again, you're diligently going through it, but your children are not retaining it, if they're forgetting it and they're not accepting it to be truth, then I encourage you to look and research more, because your goal in whatever curriculum you find is that the ideas that are introduced inside it are accepted as truth and that are retained for their further education of the character and conduct, as well as their knowledge. And Charlotte Mason calls us spiritual germs. So if you can think about how a seed, we plant, we water it, we give it sunshine, we give it all that it needs to be nurtured. And then it begins to sprout buds. And then those buds become flowers, and then they just keep growing and growing. This is what I want you to visually begin to look at. And we have to put those vast number of ideas from things as well as thoughts in front of our children in the form of curricula. Curricula is not just within those hours of homeschooling. It's a life. It's an idea of life, because ideas are constantly being introduced to your children. Ideas are constantly being introduced to you. And if we recognize how those little conversations are literally sprouting ideas in our mind, a perfect example is just a few weeks back. It's a little more than a few weeks back, about a month ago, we were in Pontiac, Ohio, right on Lake Erie. And we heard this little conversation of someone talking about finding blue glass. Well, we heard it, and next thing we're like, that's an idea. We should go and do it. We spent 2 times at Lake Erie digging for blue glass, and we were rewarded for our efforts. We brought back quite a few. So I want you to recognize we are constantly being introduced to ideas, no matter the age. And if we are very intentional about those ideas at a young age through curricula as well as life, then we are in fact doing a good thing for our children. But we need to recognize that ideas are both wholesome and unwholesome. And we have to help our children to accept and reject those ideas based on the wholesomeness of it or the unwholesomeness of it. And it's up to us as parents to do that. If you don't have the kit, I encourage you to go to homeschoolconfidencekit.com and get this step by step for you. Charlotte Mason says one more thing about ideas. She says one thing more, a single idea may be a possession so precious in itself, so fruitful, that the parent cannot fitly allow the child's selections of ideas to be a matter of chance. His lesson should furnish him with such ideas as shall make for his further education. So when you have your children going at friends and they come back and they have these all ideas that are not wholesome, that are not helpful, we have to recognize we can't leave them to chance. If those friendships are bringing back unwholesome ideas on a continual basis, we need to be working towards helping our children know how to reject them. We have this saying in our family, be the influence. That's what we say. And all I had to say is to Manoah is and he'll say influence. And when I see him being an influence, a powerful influence, you better believe I praise that boy. Recently, like last week, we were enjoying a drone show for the first time. Colorful. They turned into different images in the sky. It was wonderful. Prior to that starting, Manoah was playing with his Rubik's Cubes outside. Sorry for the dog barking next door. And when he was playing with it, someone noticed him and came over and he goes, I will give you this money. It was $1.50 in his hand of coins. He goes, I'll give you this if you can solve it quickly. And Manoah's like, okay, he can do it. Manoah knew his best time was 58 seconds with a 3x3. He knows that he can consistently hit a minute and 10 seconds. Well, he actually hit a minute and 12 seconds, I think it was. And it blew that boy away. That boy was probably 16 or 17 years old. And he timed him and made sure what the time was. And he was floored by that. And when Manoah came over, I said to him, you were the influence. And that's what I'm hoping that boy walks away and goes and gets a Rubik's Cube himself. So that's what I want you to do. Now, as you're coming into your curriculum choices, there are 3 types of curriculum. I'm going to walk you through this. And And I want you to recognize there are pros and cons to each one. The kit has the pros and cons. I don't have a lot of time to go through them, but I want you to have this checklist of the pros and cons, because as you're making these decisions, I want you to be able to stop and think, okay, does this really fit my philosophy of education? And is this really the type of curriculum I want my child to have? So let's walk through them. Curriculum type number one is box curriculum, and we all know what that is. But what I want to do is help you to understand that box curriculum is built to appease homeschool laws by following the educational system that has been standardized by traditional education. Now, if you think that's perfectly okay, that's your opinion, and that is something that you can be fine with. If you want to have a little more information about what Charlotte Mason calls as it being not the right thing, I encourage you to listen to last week's part one. I walk you through that in great detail. But I want you to know that box curriculum often leads to a lot of challenges throughout the year, because it makes it where the child does not have that earnest attention, that eager attention. And I want them to have that in order for those ideas to be living. All right. So the character or curriculum type number two is method friendly curriculum. Now, method friendly curriculum is a hybrid of traditional and philosophical education that moves you in the right direction of the desired results while focusing on the mechanical actions. So it has both a method and a system in place. And if you were part one, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Charlotte Mason says this: mothers seldom talk down to their children. They are too intimate with the little people and have therefore too much respect for them. But professional teachers, rather the writers of books or the givers of lessons, are too apt to present a single grain of pure knowledge in a whole gallon of talk, imposing upon the child the labor of discerning the grain and extracting it from the worthless flood. That's what Charlotte Mason says. So if your curriculum choices have a method, so if it's Charlotte Mason friendly, let's just use that because I'm talking Charlotte Mason. So if it says Charlotte Mason friendly curriculum, but it goes on and on and on and on, and it's really hard to get that single valuable idea from it, that's what Charlotte Mason talks about as twaddle. Charlotte Mason calls this twaddle. If you read her original writings, you will see that if it goes on and on and on, and it's hard to get that idea, it's twaddle. It's actually foolishness. And when we talk down to our children will stay talked down. They will not have a large vocabulary. But if they're left to themselves and have already been given good ideas beforehand, their vocabulary improves all on their own without any influence, additional influence. So the third type is designed curriculum. Designed curriculum is based on an educational method that is constructed around interest, both that come under a child's notice and are introduced to a child while earning the eager attention of children. Now, what I want you to recognize is that Charlotte Mason was all about ensuring that we are introducing our children, not only seizing happy moments and making our children grab hold of the ideas that come under their notice, but in addition to that, we are also giving them new ideas. That is our duty, and we need to take it seriously to be introducing to them a lot of wholesome ideas. This is why I started the movement, the 1,000 wholesome ideas, is because in less than 3 years, you can provide your children with all kinds of wholesome ideas that they learn how to accept and retain while building the character and conduct to be able to reject and forget those unwholesome ideas around them. All right, so let's get back to those three queries I talked about at the beginning. Those three queries that Charlotte Mason said is these three questions that mothers should answer. And when we answer these in a definite and thought out process, then we've solved the problem of curricula. So what are those questions? I have them written out here in the kit for you and giving you space for you to have a definite and thought out answer to. The one is, why must the children learn at all? Why are we requiring an education for them? The second is, what should they learn? Okay, we know why they should learn, but now what should they learn? And this is individual. Each child will either be behind or right on time or ahead of what is the scope of their age. And their skills may or may not be ready for them. But in addition to that, what wholesome ideas should we be influencing them during this school year? And you need to become very definite and thoughtful about that answer for each and every one of your children. And then how should they learn it? And this is where you're going to decide system or method. Are we going to only focus on the external mechanics, the external functions of education, or are we going to really hone in on the internal? And when we use both, we've gotten far further because of it. Those are the 3 questions that I walk you through. Now, after you have answered that question, I have another page in here, your curriculum type. This is going to help you to understand what it is. Do you want to piece together, take a little bit here and a little bit there, and piece together? This is what I've been doing for we're going on 23 years of homeschooling. This is what I'm known for, is piecing together those curriculum choices. It can be overwhelming at the beginning, but what I will tell you is it'll be the most rewarding. And in addition to that, it won't only just be rewarding. Your children will earn their eager attention. They will give perfect execution because their interest is there. And they will be accepting and retaining the information that you give before them. And that equals progress. And we can give our children progress each and every week. We can trust ourselves more because our children are confident too. So it's not just about the parents being confident, it's also about their children being confident. We cannot learn without confidence. It is the key. We cannot have success without confidence. It is the key. Now, I have to tell you, this 4 test that you should be doing, applying to your children's lessons, are going to change everything about what you do with your curriculum. You have a simple test checklist that will say, number 1, the material for their mental growth. How is this helping them progress through the stages of transition? Number 2, test, exercise the several powers of their minds, making sure that they have attention, making sure they have perfect execution, making sure the focus is there, and many other powers of their mind, making sure they're there. Number 3, furnish them with fruitful ideas. What ideas are fruitful that is inside that curriculum? And then test number 4, afford them knowledge, really valuable for its own sake, accurate and interesting. That's what Charlotte Mason said. So first of all, is it really valuable? How is this going to help my child to know this? And is it accurate? In other words, is it true? And then also, is it interesting? Does it interest them? And if we can pass all 4 of these tests with our curriculum, you will, in fact, not only grow in confidence, but your children will grow right along with you. And the more you begin to trust yourself in your decisions that you make in your curriculum, you will, in fact, be prepared for what I'm teaching next week, which is the habits of education. You don't want to miss that one. That one's a good one. But before we close today's episode, I want to end with this word of caution from Charlotte Mason. Regardless of what curriculum you choose, listen closely to these words. No work should be given to a child that he cannot execute perfectly. And then perfection should be required from him as a matter of course. So when you're thinking about what you should have your children learn, make sure it's within their age and their skills. There are some children who are younger that are capable of far more, and they know it. And when there's confidence to being challenged to be more advanced, they're going to arise to that challenge. But we have to also be considering not giving our children too much that they are watered down, because that becomes twaddle. And we have to make sure that we're causing our children to know they're capable of something. This is where their confidence is key, and expecting perfection from them, perfect execution. And so if we're giving them things that they're constantly getting wrong, we need to stop and say, what have they missed? Where's the gaps? And we need to fill those gaps. So if your children are behind, this is the year that you need to make intentional decisions about those gaps. and give the children the work that they're capable of executing perfectly, and then expect perfection. All right, thank you for joining me for this week's episode. Next week, we're going to be talking about the third decision, which is what habits are necessary for a confident homeschool mom and her children. Again, this is two parts of confidence, the mom confidence and the children's confidence, and you do not want to miss next week. Invite a friend, tag a friend in this if you found it useful, and get the kit, because I'm telling you, beyond this, you'll pull this out time and time again, especially for the 4-part test that I just shared today. So homeschoolconfidencekit.com, and then I'll see you next week, same time, same place. Bye for now.